Greetings everyone and welcome to the Occult Think Tank. My name is Greg. In this video I am going to be talking about Exodus chapter 12 from verses 1 through 14. This is a very important subject, especially if you're an atheist, because if you just listen to Christians you will have a very distorted idea of what Passover is about. And I highly doubt that a Christian would actually mention Exodus 12 because frankly I don't think many of them have read it themselves. Now in this you're not just going to hear me going over these 14 verses, you're going to see them in front of you. And you will be able to see that I am not twisting or distorting a damn thing. That what I say is there is actually there. You will also see that this isn't a matter of interpretation. This is a matter of what do the words on the page say. There is also no symbolism in these 14 verses. This is literally talking about a ritual that the Jewish people or Israelites were to do and why. But to begin with, Exodus chapter 12 verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, verse 2, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Verse 3, Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house. Now I'm going to pause there for a second to talk about the dates that are given, because what you will see is in Exodus 2, chapter 12 verse 2, it says this month shall be the beginning of months. It is the first month of the year to you. The first month of the year in Judaism is called Rosh Hashanah. And the dates that it falls, I'll have links in the description bar below to the websites where you can look at this page in more depth at your own leisure. But what is important to note is the dates of when this has happened and will happen in 2016 and 2017. This is just the beginning of the new year in Judaism. 10 days after, which was mentioned in verse 3, that the 10th day of this month, that everyone will take a lamb according to their house, a lamb for a house. That day is called Yom Kippur. It is the Day of Atonement. And an important thing to note is the date of when that is, because it is not the Passover date that is given with the Easter holiday or Passover holiday. That is a completely different month in the Jewish calendar. However, verse 4, And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. Verse 5, Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. Ye shall take it out of the sheep or of the goats. This is a lamb. This is not a human being. Nowhere in this story does it say that it can be a human being, and you will see why it can't be a human being very soon. Verse 6, And you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. Verse 7. And they shall take the blood and strike it on the two sides of the post, on the most part of the house, wherein they shall eat it. They will take and put the blood around the door like you see before you. But in verse 7, there is an important thing to note, that they will strike the blood on the doorposts, the two sides and the upper doorpost of the house, wherein they shall eat it. This is not something that can be symbolic, because it literally, I want to really hammer on this, where it says, they shall eat it. Verse 8. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire, and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs. They shall eat it. A second time, clearly saying that the lamb that is killed and blood put on the door shall be consumed. Verse 9. Eat not of it raw or sodden at all with water, but roast with fire his head and his legs, and with the pertinence thereof. Verse 10. And ye shall leave nothing of it remain until morning. That which remaineth until morning ye shall burn with fire. The lamb, if any part of the lamb was left over in the morning, it had to be burnt with fire. It had to be consumed completely with fire. Verse 11. And thus shall ye eat it, with your loins girded, and your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Ye shall eat it. You shall eat it in haste. It's the Lord's Passover. Verse 12. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. That is dealing with basically the angel of death, or the angel of wrath. Verse 13. And the blood shall be to you a token upon the houses where ye are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. It was all about if the blood was on the door, at least according to the story. Verse 14. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial. You shall keep it at a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. At no time in this was there a single mention of sin. Also, the idea of the lamb had to be without blemish. It couldn't be Jesus, simply for the simple fact, one, nowhere in the story does it say that it can be a human, for obvious reasons of it has to be consumed, but also the without blemish, the aspect of Jesus being whipped completely disqualifies him from being the lamb because, as you can see, he would definitely have a blemish. There's also the aspect of Jesus being on the cross. Christians love to tout their Jesus being on the cross as being a good thing for them. But one thing I want to draw to your attention, and you will see it before you, is Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 22 and 23. If a man hath committed a sin worthy of death, and he be put to death, and thou hang him on a tree, verse 23, his body shall not remain upon the tree, but thou shalt in any wise bury him that day. For he that is hanged is accursed of God. Bear that in mind. He that is hanged is accursed of God, that the land not be defiled, which the Lord thy God hath given thee for an inheritance. At no time was the idea of somebody being crucified or hung on a tree a plan of the Old Testament God to forgive the world. It simply didn't work that way. Because one of the things to note in verse 22 it says, if a man hath committed a sin worthy of death. The idea that Jesus being an innocent man and all of that is a clear abomination in Proverbs 17:15. He that justifieth the wicked, and he that condemneth the just, even they both are an abomination to the Lord. You can't have somebody as a vicarious redemption in the Old Testament. It simply doesn't work. Christians want to try and distort what is in the Bible to fit their agenda, when the truth of the matter is Passover had nothing to do with Jesus. It was all about the God not killing the firstborns, and the lamb that was involved had to be consumed. What you will also note in the story of Exodus 12 is nowhere in those 14 verses was there a single word about sin. Not one word. Nor was there a single word about redemption. This was all relating to the last plague in Egypt. But one of the things that can be noted, just as a bit of a side note, is the question of, is the Jewish God a volcano? Because the plagues that happen in Egypt scientifically can be explained by a volcanic eruption. Even this last plague, because of the firstborns would be put lower to the ground, and that when the toxic gases from the volcanic eruption would have entered the houses, those that would have been on lower to the ground, would have been killed. It has nothing to do with blood on the door, but rather the elevation that the child or person was sleeping at in the house. The thing is, these are things that aren't in the story that have come out scientifically. We can explain these things. We can explain all of the plagues in Egypt. So it's not a matter of this, in a sense, proving the God of the Old Testament, but rather the story itself was never about taking away the sins of the world. That is simply not in the story. In fact, the Passover lamb wasn't even about taking away sin at all. It was all about not having the firstborns killed. The thing is, it really comes down to when Christians try and say something, check them out. Don't be afraid to go into the Bible and actually read it. Now, feel free to leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section. Later, people.